So, my name is Judy Byron. I'm the Adult Program Coordinator here at the Waterbury Library, and it is my pleasure to welcome Martin Gitlin. He is the author of the Ultimate Boston Red Sox Time Machine book, and he's going to take us through the history from 1800s, that early? Marty?
1901.
1901. Boy, I was pretty close. 1901. And I just want to give a plug for Marty. He has books with him, and you can purchase not just the Ultimate Boston Red Sox Time Machine book, but personalized, autographed from Marty. And Marty is a veteran sports writer as well. And how many years have you been doing that?
Well, I was a newspaper sports writer for about 25 years. And then well, no, it was closer to 20 years. And then I became a sports book author.
All right. And you've written what now, 4 different clubs now?
I'm on my 6th right now.
Okay, see, I'm pretty good.
Yeah,
We
I've
don't
done
want to
5.
talk about those others. Well, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Marty, because I know you've got a lot of things to share with us and a lot of fun. And I just want to tell folks that Marty, after a couple of videos, he'll be throwing out some trivia questions. And if you know the answer, just type it in the chat, and we'll just keep kind of a running thing going. So do they get any prizes, Marty, for getting the right answers?
Yes, they do. They get my complete admiration.
That's good. All right. Well, without further ado, it's yours. And do you want to get rid of me on the screen, or are you going to take care of that, or what?
Yeah. I don't know if I can get rid of you. I think you got to get rid of yourself.
Well,
it doesn't. It's okay. I mean, I don't think once I'm sharing this, if I'm sharing the screen, you won't be seen because my screen through the presentation will be big. It'll be
okay.
It'll cover the whole screen. I don't believe that you'll be in it.
Excellent. Take it
I
away.
think we'll be okay. But I do want to first of all thank you and the Waterbury Library for having me in for the invitation. I'm really pleased that you did, and I want to thank everybody in the program tonight for joining. It makes me feel good to see some faces there. And the one thing that you said that I appreciate is that you called me Marty. I love that because all my publishers decided they want to put Martin on the cover of all my books because they feel it makes me look more sophisticated and formal than I am. I'm completely unsophisticated, and so Marty is the way I always go. And if you do, the only person that ever called me Martin really in my entire life was my mother. And that was only when she was mad at me. So, you know, I'm definitely Marty. And when we do the question and answer period, if you do utter my name, you know, certainly feel free to call me Marty. This is my book. It's called The Ultimate Boston Red Sox Time Machine book. And it's 23 chapters of Red Sox history going back to 1901, 120 years of Red Sox history. And it really covers the greatest and most interesting and intriguing teams and players and events and moments in Red Sox history. In fact, there's a whole chapter about Red Sox Nation, which we'll be talking about soon. And it's just really, really fun book. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it when we're done. And people, people come up to me when they see this book and they said, because I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I've been in Cleveland all my life. And they say, what are you doing from Cleveland writing a book about the Red Sox? And I have to explain to them, when I was 10 years old, my dad took us to Boston. In fact, you know, we went on a vacation every year somewhere. We would drive somewhere every summer and go on a little vacation. And he loved to go to New England. And we went to New England a lot. In fact, my wife and I, when we retire in a couple of years, are thinking about moving to New England. We live in a, you know, we live in a big city like Cleveland. We want to do a 180 and maybe move to like a little village or a town in Vermont or New Hampshire or Massachusetts or Rhode Island or whatever it might be, Connecticut, you know, and live a real peaceful existence. But anyway, so when I was a kid, my dad took us to Boston when I was 10 years old. And coincidentally enough, it was 1967. And that, of course, was the impossible dream season for the Red Sox. It was a June afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, and I was just thrilled to pieces because I was such a big baseball fan. And I was used to going to baseball games at a place called Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which was a big, huge, no personality mausoleum on Lake Erie. It had 85,000 seats. It was a big bowl, had no nuances, no nothing. And there was like 2,000 fans would trickle in every game, you know, to see the team because it was a bad team anyway. And it just had no personality. So here I was in front of Fenway Park. And I told my dad, I said, look at this, Dad. This is a real ballpark. This isn't a stadium. This is a ballpark. And there was all this hustle and bustle on the streets. You know, people were pouring in. It was so exciting for me. And then when I got into Fenway Park, I was like, it was another sensory delight for me because there were all these nuances. There was the Citgo sign, and there was the pesky pole, and there was the, you know, green monster, and the way that the stands jutted out past third base and way out into center field, and the fans were filling up the seats. And I was so excited. And ever since then, you know, from that moment forward, I became a Red Sox fan, as well as an Indians fan. I was still, you know, still loyal to the Indians, but I became a big Red Sox fan. And when I got a little bit older and became a sports writer, started covering baseball, I could not wait every year to get to Fenway Park. That was my, you know, that was my dream trip every year when I was covering the Indians, to, you know, go to Fenway Park, because I always remembered that I had such fond memories of when I was 10 years old going there. And I always, it was always my favorite place to go anyway, because it was my favorite park to go to. And then when I got a little bit older than that, I left the newspaper business because it was starting to tank in 2002. And eventually I started writing a lot of books, and I came up with the idea, and I'll show it again. I came up with the idea of doing these time machine books about the entirety of these baseball franchises, because no one else had really done that before. They had always focused on something specific, but I thought it would be a good idea to do these time machine books that cover the entire history of these franchises. And my publisher liked the idea. And he said, Marty, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a 1 week and you can decide which two teams you want to start with. And I said, I don't need a week. I'll tell you right this second. I want to do the Indians and the Red Sox. That's what I want to do, Indians and Red Sox. And he said, okay, go ahead. And the Ultimate Time Machine book was born. Now, I want to talk real quickly about Red Sox Nation. Red Sox Nation is unique because every other major league franchise, their fan base is based in the city in which they play. The Indians fan base is based in Cleveland. You know, the Royals fan base is based in Kansas City, so on and so forth. Red Sox Nation is not based anywhere. It's not based in Boston. It's Maine, and it's New Hampshire and Vermont and Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts. It's all over New England. And not only that, but there are Red Sox fans, transplants all over the world. I'm going to show you a video. The last video I want to show you tonight is going to be from the 2018 World Series at Dodger Stadium. And you will hear when the Red Sox did something well, the cheering at Dodger Stadium, 3,000 miles away from Boston. It sounds like it's a game being played at Fenway Park. There's so much cheering. And so that just, you know, shows you the extent. Now, a lot of people believe that Red Sox Nation was born in 1967 with the Impossible Dream season that we just talked about. But when I was researching my book, it seemed to me that Red Sox Nation was born before the Red Sox were even born in 1901, when their birth as the Boston Americans. They were called the Boston Americans. They became the Red Sox in 1908 because there was a guy named Michael McGreevy. Now, Michael McGreevy owned the Third Base Saloon on Columbus Avenue. Hold on. Hey, Mitzi. Oh, my dog's barking. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, he owned a saloon called the Third Base Saloon on Columbus Avenue in Boston. And his nickname was Nuff Said because they would always argue about baseball at the saloon. And Michael McGreevy would say, make his point. And he would say, Nuff Said. That was the end of the argument. He was known as Michael Nuff Said McGreevy. And he formed a fan club from the Third Base Saloon called the Royal Rooters. The Royal Rooters were passionate Boston American fans, and then later Boston Red Sox fans. They used to, you know, travel to road games, and they would sit. The Royal Rooters would sit behind home plate in chairs in front of the stands for home games. And the catcher, catcher would, you know, there would be a foul ball or a wild pitch or a pop up back there, and the catcher would have to go fish the ball away from the Royal Rooters. Here's a little bit more about the Royal Rooters.
The Royal Rooters appear to be a first.
They would march up Ruggles Street to the new stadium, and they would have a marching band with them. McGreevy had his shillelagh to lead the procession.
Nussed was clearly an organizer, and he was the final authority.
They were trying to be obnoxious. They were trying to, drive people from New York and Pittsburgh crazy, and they did a really good job of it.
McGreevy's saloon looked like Cheers after a Victorian interior decorator had gotten a hold of it.
Our boys will beat you on the field, we'll beat you off the field and take your money home with us.
Gambling was big business.
You had John F. Kennedy's grandfather was a member of the Royal Rooters.
Just Grandpa's presence gave a special bit of panache to the Royal Rooters.
It was an extremely democratic organization, democratic in that it allowed everyone to behave like a rowdy.
They sort of were the Johnny Appleseeds of this relation between the fans and sports.
These men were fine men, they had great personality.
They were very emotional. They went to Pittsburgh, they went by train to New York.
They were examples of second-generation Irish who really made Boston what it is today.
The Roxbury Rooters, they rallied around the fact that there was this fire, and that not only were they going to root for the baseball team, but they're rallying together to pull together the community after, an extremely devastating fire.
There we go. Now, the Boston Americans, and then they became the Red Sox in 1908, had a great team. They really did. The 1903 Boston Americans won the very first World Series ever played. And they had players like Cy Young, who was maybe the greatest pitcher of all time. He won 511 games, and the way the game is played today, that record will never, ever, ever be broken again. And Tris Speaker, who was one of the greatest hitters ever. They had a pitcher named Smokey Joe Wood, who won 34 games and lost 5 one year. And that remained for many, many years the greatest winning percentage in baseball history. But they really, really came together and became explosive in around 1914. And that was when they acquired a player who you all know named Babe Ruth. Now, a lot of people talk about how the Red Sox sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees to create the Curse of the Bambino the day after Christmas in 1919. But a lot of people don't know is that the Red Sox acquired Babe Ruth in 1914 the same way. They got him from a minor league organization in Baltimore, whose owner was kind of struggling financially, and he was selling off players, including Babe Ruth. Now, it became a problem. And the reason it became a problem was Babe Ruth came up as a pitcher, a left-handed pitcher, and we're talking about a Hall of Fame caliber left-handed pitcher. I mean, he was brilliant. But within a couple of years, it became apparent during the dead ball era, when he was slugging home runs over the fence all the time, that he was going to start revolutionizing baseball with his bat. And the Red Sox didn't know what to do. Management thought that if they put him in their lineup every day as an everyday player, it would ruin his pitching. And Babe Ruth wanted to play every day because he loved to hit. So there was this conflict between Babe Ruth and management about what they were going to do. This video, and I'll talk a little bit about how they sold Babe Ruth, but this video talks a little bit about the Boston Americans and Boston Red Sox in their early years and the arrival and impact of Babe Ruth.
When Ban Johnson created the American League, he determined very early on that the team in Boston was going to be one of his flagship franchises. Boston had this aura that they were the team that was always going to win. One way or another, Boston was going to come out on top.
With great pitching and defense, Boston won 5 of the first 15 World Series, including 1903 with the immortal Cy Young on the mound. In 1912, the Sox christened Fenway Park with a second championship and won again in 1915, 1916, and 1918. The pitching star of that team was Babe Ruth, who the Sox had bought from an industrial league in Baltimore in 1914. Ruth was only 19 years old, but he won big right away.
He won 18 games. The next year, 1960 and 1917, he won 23 and 24 games. In the World Series in 1918, he pitched a shutout and then pitched 7 scoreless innings to extend his scoreless streak to 29 innings, which was the record for more than 40 years. He was a sensational pitcher, but his hitting began to take over, and he loved to hit. He loved the sense of hitting.
In 1919, the Babe led the American League with 29 home runs, which was more than all but 5 teams in baseball. Ruth was the Red Sox principal attraction, the team's biggest draw. But prior to the 1920 season, Boston owner Harry Frazee, a New York theater producer, sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. That single transaction, perhaps the most famous and curious in sports history, defined the Red Sox franchise. And Frazee, from that moment on, he was pegged Boston's all-time villain, the buffoon who peddled the Babe.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let us go to our first trivia question. Are you guys ready? Don't forget, put the answers in chat. Here is your first trivia question. This one, I start out with a little bit of a toughie, so no sweat if you don't get it right. But anyway, Ted Williams, who we're going to talk about next. Ted Williams, 9 years after he retired, he became the manager of a major league American League team, a woebegone American League franchise that always lost. And he turned them around in 1969. For 1 year, he turned them around, and he won the Manager of the Year award. For what team did Ted Williams' American League club win the Manager of the Year award in 1969?
So, Marty, I've got a couple answers, and they're the same.
Okay.
Well, so we got Senators from Jim, and we've got Washington from John. And
they're both right. The Washington Senators, very good, guys. That's a tough one. Well done. The Washington Senators, they became the Texas Rangers in 1972. Ted Williams was still managing, but I'll tell you what, they were such a bad franchise that he could only turn around for 1 year, and they went back to being lousy thereafter. But good job. Okay. Now, people talk about why Harry Frazee sold Ruth to the Yankees the day after Christmas in 1919. And the common belief is that he did so he could fund a play on Broadway called No, No, Nanette. And there's some truth to that, but there's a lot more that goes into it. One, the novelty of Fenway Park had worn off by 1919 and attendance was down. So that meant less revenue for Harry Frazee. The 1918 season was shortened because of World War I. That meant less attendance. That meant less revenue for him. Also, by 1919, the Red Sox were forced to play Babe Ruth every day. I mean, they couldn't, he set an all-time home run record that year. And they were forced to play him every day. Babe Ruth wanted his salary doubled. He was on a 3-year contract for $10,000 a year. He wanted it $20,000 a year. So that irked Harry Frazee. And lastly, there were the people that considered themselves moralistic in Boston, including in the Red Sox management, that knew that Babe Ruth was a gambler and he was a womanizer and he used to swear a lot and he'd go to brothels, and they thought he was a bad influence on the children and even the adults of Boston. So they tried to urge Harry Frazee to get rid of Babe Ruth. Well, the bottom line is that the Red Sox absolutely positively stunk from 1922 to 1933 as Harry Frazee continued to give away players, mostly to the Yankees. And for that 12-year period, the Red Sox finished last or second last in the American League every year.
Wow.
They lost over 100 games 5 times during that stretch, which is tough to do in a 154-game schedule. By the mid-30s, they started to come around. They bought a couple players like Jimmy Fox, who was one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. and Lefty Grove, a great pitcher, and they started becoming at least mediocre. And in 1939, they put on the field a rookie named Ted Williams. Now, Ted Williams drove in 145 runs as a rookie, which is crazy. And in 1941, he was batting 400 going into the last day of the season. No one had hit 400 for the past 11 years in baseball. He was hitting 400 going into the last day of season. And the manager of the Red Sox, Joe Cronin, he comes up to Ted. He says, "Hey, Ted, why don't you sit this doubleheader out? It's a meaningless doubleheader, and you can maintain your 400 batting average." Well, Ted Williams refused. He said, "I don't play that way. I want to do it from beginning to end." And he did. He got 6 hits in the doubleheader. He was 4 for 5 in the opener, got 6 hits in the doubleheader, and he ended up batting 406. And 80 years later, nobody has ever batted 400 ever since. Now, this next video I'm going to show you is kind of twofold. One, Ted Williams was a great teammate. All his teammates loved him. And one of his teammates was Dom DiMaggio. And Dom DiMaggio was the brother of Ted Williams' rival, Joe DiMaggio. And in fact, Dom DiMaggio was a borderline Hall of Famer himself. He was a great player. And he loved Ted Williams. And that made his brother mad. Joe DiMaggio used to go up to his brother and say, "Hey, why do you love Ted Williams so much? He's my arch rival. He's your teammate, but I'm your brother, for goodness sake." And Dom DiMaggio just laughed it off. But anyway, another aspect of this video is Ted Williams was a scientific hitter. And in this day and age today, they talk about analytics, where they analyze everything, every little detail, like the launch angle of a swing, or the way that a spin rate of a pitch comes in, or the way fielders are, need to be lined up to field particular hitters, all these kind of stuff. Ted Williams was doing that 75 years ago. He was doing it decades and decades before analytics became a thing. And so this video also goes into depth about his being a scientific hitter.
But actually, Ted was a very generous soul and great to his fellow players.
In fact, Williams counted Dom DiMaggio, Joe's younger brother, among his closest clubhouse friends, along with shortstop Johnny Pesky and his old Pacific Coast League teammate, Bobby Doerr.
He was just a really true friend. He would do anything in the world for you. And everybody on the ball club liked Ted. He's the type of fellow that draws attention. It seems like if he walked into the room, if there was 15 people in there, within 4 or 5 minutes, they'd all be around Ted.
I thought he was the almighty when I first got there. Of course, I was the third man in, and he used to make fun of me once in a while. And he'd call me by my Christian name, but he didn't even pronounce it right. He'd say, "Johnny Pavaskovich, huh?" He said, "What is that, a disease?"
He lived like the kid that he wanted to be from the start. He hung out with a clubhouse guy. He lived almost like a small towner in Boston.
He didn't go out to dinner with a lot of ball players. He wasn't a big carouser. But he collected a bunch of people that he came across, ordinary people who he became closest to.
The crowd was cabbies and firemen and guys he'd met on the street. And none of the nabobs of Boston was invited. He didn't like people who thought they were something great and maybe thought he wasn't.
When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a baseball player. And we didn't have television then. We just had magazines. And I used to read about Ted Williams. And because he was left-handed, and I was left-handed, because he was from Southern California, and I was, because as I learned more about him, he grew up in a neighborhood very similar to mine, I just made a connection to him in my head. And I thought he had just an incredible swing. I tried to pattern my swing after his, but from looking at pictures. And the more I learned about him, the more I realized that he was a scientific hitter with just incredible natural ability.
Anticipation. You see a fastball and your eye-hand coordination isn't quite good enough. You got to say fastball and start in that area. So you anticipate what's going to go on. Up, there it is. Bam.
Ted just brought a passion to hitting a baseball that I don't think Boston had seen, or maybe anybody had seen. Nobody had deconstructed that simple act the way he had.
When he talked about baseball, it was like water coming out of the river.
In the batter's box, he was like a scientist.
He knew why the curveball curved, and he knew brains in the bat.
And he made a study of the pitchers. He knew more about every pitcher in the league than they knew about themselves.
Trying to sneak a fastball by Ted Williams was like trying to sneak a sunbeam by a rooster in the morning. It's not going to happen.
He did things in his head that they do now in computers.
And the scientific mind, together with the physical abilities, the touch, the feel, he had to the utmost.
He used to take his bats to the post office and weigh them to make sure they hadn't gained an ounce of moisture. He didn't have to look a certain way. He didn't have to have shined shoes. He didn't wear a tie. But on the ball field, in the batter's box, nothing was beyond or beneath his notice. He had to be perfect.
Now, the game has changed. Obviously, the game has changed so much and since then. And one of the ways it's changed is back until 1969. Really, the World Series was it. There was no such thing as the playoffs. Now, half the teams or nearly half the teams in the Major League Baseball make the playoffs. Well, back then, no teams made the playoffs. It was just the World Series, and that was it. And because the Yankees dominated that era, Ted Williams only had one opportunity to show himself on that kind of national stage in the World Series, and that was 1946. And the Red Sox lost the World Series to St. Louis 4-3. So he only had that one opportunity. Now, I talked about how the Red Sox have really only had two bad eras in their history, which really speaks of the great history they've had. One of them was, of course, 1920s and early 30s, which was not only one of the worst eras in Red Sox history, but one of the worst eras in baseball history. The other era in which the Red Sox struggled, they had 8 consecutive losing seasons in the late 50s through the mid 60s. And one of the reasons for that was after Jackie Robinson integrated the sport in 1947, the Red Sox steadfastly refused to integrate their team. And other teams, meanwhile, were busily, adding black ball players to their rosters and Cuban Americans as well. And, getting better because of it. Well, the Red Sox refused. It must be said for historical correctness that Tom Yawkey, the owner of the Red Sox at that time, had some racist tendencies, and he didn't want to integrate. Back in the 60s, Jim Lomborg, a pitcher for the Red Sox, once said that he thought that Tom Yawkey had become enlightened by then and had changed his ways. But in the 50s, he hadn't. In the early 60s, he hadn't. And in the 50s, he hadn't. Now, Tom Yawkey, he hired a manager named Pinky Higgins. Pinky Higgins once said, "I am not going to be adding any black ball players to this team." And he did not use the word black. But anyway, by the mid 60s, the Red Sox indeed had added some really good black talent, including Reggie Smith, who was one of the, really good all-around player and home run hitter. George Boomer Scott, who was a great slugger. Earl Wilson, a pretty good pitcher, who, he became a little better when he went to Detroit, but he was a fine pitcher. But it didn't matter. In 1966, the Red Sox finished 9th in the American League, and they had eight losing seasons in a row. But it all came together in 1967. And I'll tell you a little personal story. Before the 1967 season, I was at home watching a new game show on television called the Hollywood Squares, which you all remember probably. It was a legendary game show, Hollywood Squares. And the host of Hollywood Squares was Peter Marshall, who, by the way, his son named Pete Lecoq played Major League Baseball. But anyway, Peter Marshall turned to his contestant and he said, "What is your name and what do you do for a living?" And the contestant said, "My name is Dick Williams, and I'm going to manage the Boston Red Sox this year." And in fact, Dick Williams won money on Hollywood Squares, and he also won money on Password. So it's a little trivia there for you. But anyway, 1967, it all came together greatly because of a guy named Carl Yastrzemski. Carl Yastrzemski won the Triple Crown that year. And no player in the American League has won the Triple Crown ever since until Miguel Cabrera did it in 2012. So it was the last Triple Crown in 45 years. And the Red Sox embarked on the greatest pennant race in baseball history that year. Going into the last weekend of the season, 4 teams, the White Sox, Red Sox, Twins, and Tigers, were all still alive for the pennant. And on the last day of the season, after the Tigers won the first game of a doubleheader, it was a 3-way tie between the Tigers, Twins, and Red Sox. And this video shows all that happened on that last day of the season and beyond, where Carl Yastrzemski continued to play the role of hero.
October 1st of 1967 saw 3 teams with identical records playing for the American League title. While the first-place Tigers hosted the Angels, the first-place Red Sox hosted the first-place Twins. Minnesota took a 2-0 lead against Sox ace Jim Lomborg. That was the score when Lomborg led off the 6th. Manager Dick Williams chose not to pinch hit.
Cesar Tovar was the third baseman at the time, and you know, as you do when you come up to the plate, you kind of scope out where everybody is, and he was playing back behind the bag.
Lomborg surprised everyone with a bunt single, igniting a rally. Yaz tied the game with a 2-run single.
Lomborg scores. Adair will score.
Yaz went 4 for 4, so he had gone 7 for 8 in the 2 most critical games of the season. With Lomborg still on the mound in the 9th, the Twins were down to their final out.
Little soft pop-up. Petrocelli will take it. He does. The ball game is over. The Red Sox win it. And what a mob on this field. They're coming out of the stands from all over.
It was just stopped in time to see all the players coming in onto the mound and congratulating you, and then turning around, all of a sudden seeing strange faces, and then there was more strange faces.
Bill Nowlands was one of those faces.
I believe I was in the first 20 or 30 or so, because I got out there in time to get to Jim Lomborg.
All of a sudden your teammates are gone and you're surrounded by strange, happy faces, headed towards right field, the pesky pole, and pretty soon I realized that I didn't want to go that direction. I really wanted to go to the dugout.
Jack Carroll and Joe Martin were still working at Fenway, not as vendors, but by now they were police officers. It was up to them and patrolman Kenny Nave to rush Lomborg to safety.
People in the dugout were yelling, "Go, go, go." We had to get out to the mound to get Lomborg.
By the time we got to him, of course, his hat was gone and they were ripping his glove. One guy had the glove. We just grabbed the glove and put it back.
And now you're moving in inches trying to get him to the dugout.
Once we got him down there, whew, but I'd never seen that many people in my life. Really? Oh my God.
Pops it up. Back of the short left. In the clubhouse, the Sox listened to the Tigers-Angels game on the radio. And when Detroit's Dick McAuliffe hit into a game-ending double play, the Sox were American League champs.
All of a sudden, for the TV stations to switch back and go back to the Red Sox locker room with them in celebration was just unbelievable.
7 for 8 in the final 2 biggest games of your life. You're too much.
I was just trying best I could, Don, and I had something going for me. I wanted to win it for Mr. Yawkey. He deserved it.
That was without a doubt my finest memory of being at Fenway Park.
With 44 homers, 121 runs batted in, and a .326 batting average, Yaz had won the Triple Crown.
I saw Willie Mays play. I saw him break in. I played with Jackie Robinson, Duke Snyder, Campanella, Pee Wee Reese, all on one ball club. He had a year I've never watched a player have before or since. That explains it. He did it all.
Toby Coffin added another hero to his list in '67, his father.
And he said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, I'm going to school like I always do. He said, well, what if I told you I got a couple of tickets to Game 1? And I just melted. Getting into the ballpark and seeing people hanging from the billboards across the street the excitement was something that I'd never seen before, before that day, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen anything, beat it to this day.
The Cardinals took Game 1 at Fenway thanks to speedster Lou Brock, who went 4 for 4, stole 2 bases, and scored 2 runs. A dominant Bob Gibson struck out 10 Red Sox.
We had the team meeting and stuff, and everybody was saying, you got to be careful of this guy, and you got to be careful of Brock. You can't let him get on base. He's the igniter. And by the time the thing was over, does anyone have anything to say? And I said, well, how is Lou Brock going to be able to get on base if he's on his back?
Game 2 began with a Lomborg pitch right under Lou Brock's chin. Lomborg was at his best. He had a no-hitter until there were 2 outs in the 8th. Gentleman Jim completed a 1-hitter. Yaz, still red hot, hit 2 homers and drove in 4 as the Sox won 5-0. In St. Louis, the Sox dropped the 3rd game, and the incomparable Gibson threw a 1-hit shutout in Game 4. The Cards were just 1 win away from the title. A determined Lomborg got the call in the must-win 5th game. Again, he shut out the Cards into the 9th. He had thrown 17 consecutive scoreless innings in the World Series.
It's a zone where physically you have all of your skills, and mentally you have all of your focus, and it all comes to play together.
St. Louis put a run on the board in the 9th, but Lomborg got the 3-1 win. So it was back to Fenway for Game 6. The Sox played long ball. Rico hit 2 homers. Yaz and Reggie Smith also went deep, and the Sox won it 8-4, forcing a Game 7. The impossible dream season again came down to just 1 game. With only 2 days' rest, Lomborg got the call to pitch Game 7.
He had pitched a couple times during the year because of his military commitment with 2 days' rest. He had no decision in one and won another one, so I didn't think I was going that far out on a limb.
Bob Gibson's epic performance continued as he tossed a 3-hitter and homered to end the impossible dream season.
Okay, here we go. Here's trivia question number 2. Are you ready? Trivia question number 2. What very large, very burly Red Sox first baseman won Most Valuable Player honors in the American League in 1995? What very large, very burly Red Sox first baseman won MVP in the American League in 1995? Put your answers in chat.
Yes. So when I do the chat, yeah, here we go. Move on. Vaughn. So,
how many Mo Vaughns you got?
We've got 4.
4 Mo Vaughns. Okay. Well, only 3 of them are right. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, very good. Okay, so I'm going to get 4 for 4. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. It's very rare when I do this program where a group gets all 5 trivia questions right. You guys are 2 for 2. We'll see how you do. Very well done. They get a little bit tougher, though. The last one's particularly tough. Now, a lot of people, or some people, maybe suspect that the 1967 season saved the Red Sox in Boston because Tom Yawkey was angry after the 1966 season, and he said he wanted the new stadium. He wanted to move out of Fenway Park. It was dilapidated. The attendance was down. Well, attendance was down because the team was bad, not because of Fenway Park. And they proved it in 1967 when they led American League in attendance, and Tom Yawkey never complained or bitched about Fenway Park again. And here it is 54 years later, and they're still playing there. Now, one of the inspirations the Red Sox had in 1967 was to play for a guy named Tony Conigliaro. Tony Conigliaro came up when he was 19 years old in 1964 and showed Hall of Fame talent. He led the American League in home runs in 1965. He was a local boy from Swampscott, Massachusetts, and he looks like he was going to be a superstar. It all fell apart for him. It all started to fall apart in 1967. On August 18th, he stepped to the plate against a California Angels pitcher named Jack Hamilton, who liked to throw inside and threw pretty hard. And he liked to crowd the plate. So it was a recipe for disaster. And this is what happened on that fateful night in 1967.
The Sox were involved in the greatest pennant race in history, and carrying a share of that load was 22-year-old right fielder Tony Conigliaro from Swampscott, Massachusetts. Tony had made the hometown team at the tender age of 19 and had homered in his first Fenway at-bat. In 1965, at the age of 20, Tony had led the American League in home runs. His aggressive style had caused him injuries in the past, but he'd always come back. This night would be different. It's Friday night, the Angels are in town, and spitballer Jack Hamilton is on the mound in the fourth inning. Tony is at the plate, he's 1 for 1. Tony hovered over the plate as the fastball rode up and in toward his head.
Tony just froze. He didn't move at all, and the ball just took off and sailed and went right up and hit him. And he went down with a loud thud.
Some people in the park thought the ball had hit his helmet, but Tony's teammates knew better from the awful sound they'd heard.
Something I'll never forget. The only thing I can compare is maybe if somebody had a melon and just threw it on the floor and you'd hear the squash.
You could tell that it wasn't a thick, that it wasn't like a glancing blow or something. You could tell that it had full impact on full meat. But it wasn't like muscle that would absorb the sound of the baseball hitting the body. There was bone there, and that's something that's entirely different.
As the crowd booed Jack Hamilton, Tony was taken off the field on a stretcher. The ball had hit him on the upper cheekbone, fracturing that bone just below the eye socket. When Tony C. hit the dirt that fateful night, he'd hit 20 home runs in 1967. He'd have to wait 2 years for the chance to hit another. Tony Conigliaro always had a flair for the dramatic. His return to the Red Sox in April 1969 was typical Tony C.
Drive to left center, players back, and it is home run for Conigliaro. Oh, boy, what a story. What a story here. And look at him. Look at that boy as he's going into that dugout there.
Tony would have 2 great seasons after his miraculous comeback, but deteriorating eyesight would end his career for good in 1975, leaving us to wonder about the Tony that might have been.
Well, I saw Tony play, and I don't think there's any question that if he'd had a chance to play out a career, that he would have ranked with the home run hitters, all-time home run hitters, I believe. He had a natural pull stroke and hit the ball in the air, which is a pretty great gift to have as far as hitting a baseball is concerned.
I was on my way to hitting a lot of home runs, and I sometimes think, well, maybe I could hit as many home runs as Babe Ruth. It did enter my mind.
Tony would find success in the broadcast booth, but tragedy would strike once again after he auditioned for a job for the Red Sox broadcasting position. Tony suffered a massive heart attack while with his brother Billy in 1982.
I asked Tony a question, and he kind of like flinched a little bit, and I asked him again, and he kind of clenched his fists, and I saw a tear come out of his left eye, and his eyes closed. And I just thought he was having trouble breathing.
Tony would be left comatose, then in need of constant care. Tony C. passed away 8 years later in 1990, just days away from his 45th birthday.
There were several reasons why the Red Sox did not continue to win after 1967, at least win a pennant. They remained good. In fact, they were consistently strong over those years. But after the 1967 season, Jim Lonborg, who was their ace pitcher, who actually won the Cy Young Award that year in '67, he had a skiing accident. And he was never really the same with the Red Sox. Whoopsie, sorry about that.
The Sox were...
There we go. He was never really the same again with Boston. He ended up having a couple good years with Milwaukee and Philadelphia, but that hurt them a little bit. But it all came together in 1975. 1975, the Red Sox put on the field the 2 greatest, maybe the greatest rookie tandem in baseball history. And that was Jim Rice and Fred Lynn. Now, Fred Lynn not only won Rookie of the Year that year, but he won AL MVP that year as well. And a lot of people believe that Jim Rice was going to be a better player than Fred Lynn. And they were right. Fred Lynn had a really great career, a really good career, but Jim Rice was a Hall of Famer. Now, a lot of baseball experts feel that 1975 was the peak year in terms of baseball popularity of all time. Because don't forget, baseball was then the national pastime. It's not really anymore. The NFL has taken over as the most popular sport in America. But they felt that way because they feel like it was the greatest World Series of all time between the Red Sox and Reds. So what I want to show you next is the greatest moment from the greatest World Series, from the greatest baseball season ever. And that was when Carlton Fisk stepped to the plate in Game 6, tie game, Red Sox down 3-2. And this is what Carlton Fisk did at Fenway Park.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run. We will have a 7th game in his 1975 World Series. Carlton Fisk becomes the first player in the series to hit one over the wall into the net. Red Sox win it 7-6 in 12 innings. And Carlton Fisk had a lot of little boy in him right there, Joe.
He took one step, knew it was going to be close, he knew it was gone, and it was dancing in the streets all the way around. Johnny Pesky greets him at first base, and he is dancing as he gets his second base.
It came very close to hitting that foul pole. We'll see how close.
There it is. Pick it up as it comes, and there it is. It did hit it, and Foster did come up with the ball, so there will be a 7th game here tomorrow night.
What a World Series, Joe Garagiola, have we seen here between these two clubs. It's fitting that we have a 7th game, you know.
It had to go to the 7th game, Dick, because they've battled and battled. And now tomorrow night, it'll be Gullett, Bill Lee, this crowd refusing to leave. Amazing. So their ball club battle back. They've been up and down, clutch plays, clutch catches. And they are just dancing in the streets here as Carlton Fisk brings a 7th game.
A lot of body English for Carlton Fisk. Watch it.
How many steps does he take? One. He waits to see it. Get over. Get over.
He knew it. There it is.
I always show that video to that point because that moment where Carlton Fisk is doing his, like air traffic controller bit and then wheeling that ball fair to hit the fair pole is what I like to call it, the fair pole. Is one of the most iconic moments in baseball history. And what I like, when I was doing research about that particular game, what I really found out that I liked was that the players in that game realized that they were making history. And that meant a lot to me because, it's of course they wanted to win the game, but that they had an appreciation for what the fans were feeling about that game. Really spoke a lot. Pete Rose of the Reds actually sidled up to Don Zimmer, whose nickname was Popeye, and he was the third base coach of the Red Sox. And Pete Rose told him, he said, "Popeye, win or lose, we are playing in the greatest game ever played." And I think that's pretty cool. He said the same thing to Carlton Fisk. Now, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to just show this briefly because it's kind of painful for Red Sox fans. 1986 World Series. The And it was an opposite situation, really, from 1975. The Red Sox were up 3-2 in Game 6, and they had a two-run lead. They'd scored 2 runs in the 10th inning to take a 2-run lead. Calvin Schiraldi, their young relief pitcher, was on the mound, who had once pitched for the New York Mets, and he's got the first 2 guys out. The Red Sox were 1 out away from winning their first World Series since the curse of the Bambino in 1918. It looked like a sure thing. Well, Calvin Schiraldi gave up 3 consecutive singles. John McNamara, the Red Sox manager, brought in Bob Stanley, and this is what happened.
And it's going to go to the backstop. Here comes Mitchell to score the tying run, and Ray Knight is at second base. And he pops it in the air, foul off to the right. Gitlin coming over. He will not have a play. That was a wild pitch.
Way inside. Gitlin reaches for it. You see he hardly moved as far as shifting, and it gets by him. A wild pitch. Apparently not near where he was looking for the pitch.
5-5 in a delirious 10th inning. Line drive foul.
And Marty Barrett was out of position because they had Knight really picked up, but Stanley didn't see him. There it is again. You see, he just reaches for the ball. Down goes Mookie. It kind of sailed inside. And here comes Barrett in to talk to Stanley, because had Mookie hit just a weak ground ball, Barrett was way out of position because they had a good chance to get Knight at second base.
Can you believe this ball game at Shea?
Oh, brother.
Woo. So the winning run is at second base with 2 out, 3-2 to Mookie Wilson. Little roller up along first, behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
Okay, let's get rid of that one. That one's painful. Now, 3 things about that. 1, a lot of people believe that John McNamara made a mistake by not removing Bill Buckner from the game after the Red Sox had taken the lead, because Bill Buckner was a very good defensive first baseman, but he had bulky knees. He wasn't healthy. He wasn't 100%, so they maybe should have taken him out. Number 2, Mookie Wilson was one of the fastest guys in baseball. And he, well, I don't know why I keep getting this pop-up. He believes, and I think rightfully so, he believes he would have beaten that out, even if Buckner had fielded it, because Buckner was well behind the bag. It was a pretty slow dribbler. Mookie Wilson was lightning fast, and the pitcher still had to come over to, take first base. So that might be true. The winning run wouldn't have scored, but that might be true as well. Now, number 3, in Game 7, which a lot of people forget, the Red Sox were up 3-0, and the starting pitcher started to falter, and McNamara made the mistake of bringing Calvin Schiraldi back into that game. Calvin Schiraldi had been pitching very well into Game 6, but he was a mess. He was like mentally and emotionally, he was carrying the burden of Game 6 into Game 7. He was not focused, and the Mets just racked him up. They scored 8 runs over the last 4 innings, and they won that game in the series. And it's interesting because people, very normal people who had no superstitions whatsoever started becoming superstitious after 1986 because they were only 1 out from the championship. And they started to believe in the curse of the Bambino. Now here's trivia question number 3. What power hitting Red Sox third baseman from the late 1970s played quarterback at the University of Alabama when he was in college? And he ended up managing the Red Sox for 3 years after he retired. What power hitting third baseman from the late 70s, very early 80s, managed the Red Sox for 3 years and played quarterback in his college days at the University of Alabama? Put your answers in chat.
Well, Jim is on track. I'm going to give another few seconds. And if no one types in, let's go with Hobson.
Yes, Butch Hobson. Well done. Okay, you're 3 for 3. I got to get a couple more trivia questions in. I fell behind a little bit. We got 2 more to go and only 3 videos. Now, I am going to show you next the most talented pitcher, I believe, the Red Sox have ever had. And that's saying a lot, considering, Roger Clemens and Cy Young and all. But I think Pedro Martinez was the most talented pitcher the Red Sox ever had. Pedro Martinez pitched in the steroid era of baseball, and teams were scoring 6 runs and 8 runs and 10 runs and 12 runs a game. And there were home runs going out of the ballpark like crazy. And here was Pedro Martinez, who every year had an ERA around 2. And one year he actually had an ERA 1 point lower than any other pitcher in the American League. And he won the ERA title 4 years in a row. Now, what made Pedro Martinez so great was not only because he could throw 97, 98 miles an hour and very intimidating with his fastball, but the difference between his fastball in velocity and his breaking balls was enormous. And what makes a pitcher great is late movement. So what I want you to watch in this video is the late movement on his breaking balls and the power of his fastball. That's what made him so great, was that players just could not square him up because he had such great late movement on his pitches. Greatest performance I ever saw in my life as a sports writer for a pitcher was in the 2001 division series between the Red Sox and Indians. The Indians had an absolutely dynamite lineup back then, one of the greatest, most powerful lineups really in baseball history. And the game was tied, or the Indians were winning 7-6 in Game 5, the deciding game in the 4th inning. Pedro Martinez came in relief and pitched no-hit ball for 6 innings. Didn't even give it, no one even got close to a hit. He struck out 8. It was absolutely a remarkable performance. And what's interesting as we move on to 2004 is this. That happened to be Pedro Martinez's worst year with the Red Sox. When they won, they finally broke the curse. In 2004, he had a 3.9 ERA, which was very high for him. And another little bit of information about that year was that was the year the Red Sox traded Nomar Garciaparra, their really popular and talented shortstop, who was often compared to Derek Jeter. Now, they traded him at the right time because even though Garciaparra wasn't that old, his body was breaking down. He was never really the same again after they traded him. But anyway, you all remember 2004. The Red Sox were down 3-0 to the Yankees in the ALCS, and no team had ever come back from a 3-0 deficit to win a playoff series ever. They were down 1 run in the 9th inning of game 4. Dave Roberts just snuck in there on a stolen base and they tied the game, but there was no guarantee they were going to win it until Big Papi, David Ortiz, stepped to the plate, and this is what Big Papi did.
Ortiz into deep right field. Back is Sheffield. We'll see you later tonight. A 5-hour, 2-minute game and worth every second of it for the Boston Red Sox.
Now, I have a friend, which alone is amazing, and he's a Red Sox fan. And he once told me that, he said, Marty, you know, isn't it a shame that the Red Sox did not clinch that series against the Yankees at Fenway Park? Wouldn't that have been special? And I tell him, no. I said, no. It was way more appropriate that they won that series at Yankee Stadium with Frank Sinatra singing New York, New York, and them celebrating there on the field with the Yankees watching from the dugout with all, you know, as many times as they tortured the Red Sox with Bucky Dent and Aaron Boone and the Red Sox and the Yankees fans from the stands, you know, tearing up. I mean, it was just perfect that the Red Sox won that at Yankee Stadium. But anyway, here's trivia question number 4. You guys ready? Trivia question number 4. Put your answers in chat. What American League team very, very stupidly waived Dave Big Papi Ortiz, allowing the Red Sox to pick him up in 2002? What American League team stupidly got rid of David Big Papi Ortiz in 2002, allowing the Red Sox to pick him up?
So we've got 3 answers. Minnesota from Jim, Brad, and John.
Good job, the Minnesota Twins. You guys are on the brink of history. So let's see if you can get 5 for 5. The last question is a little bit tough. It's very old school, but we'll see how you do. Now, a lot of people believed, and I did, that the Red Sox were destined to win that World Series in 2004. They had so much momentum after sweeping through the Yankees those last 4 games. And there were a lot of contributors. One of them was a guy named Mark Bellhorn. He stepped to the plate in a tie game, 9-9 tie at Fenway Park in game 1 and in the 8th inning. And this is what Mark Bellhorn did. What I want you to look at here, and I don't know why I like this so much, there's a Red Sox fan doing a funky dance in the stands after this home run. So you could check that out and see if you like the way he's dancing too.
Into right field again, down the line, near the pole, home run, Bellhorn. A 2-run shot, and it's 11-9 Boston in game 1.
There he is.
This one with much more significance. Off the fencing along the foul pole down the right field line to put Boston back on top, 11-9.
Okay. Here it is, the moment we've all been waiting for, the last trivia question before the last video. And here it is. In 1945, the Red Sox had a pitcher who won 25 games. The next year, he won 21 games. And it looked like he was going to go on to a great career, but elbow problems prevented him from becoming a star. What was the name of this pitcher who won 46 games in the mid-40s? His nickname was Boo. B-O-O, like Halloween, Boo.
Boy, nobody's typing in there, Marty. Did you?
Oh no, we got to get someone.
Jim is good. Jim says Ferris.
Ferris, yes, Dave Boo Ferris. Hey, 5 for 5. Way to go, guys.
And he also asks, was that Matt that was doing the dancing?
I don't know who was doing the dancing, just some random fan.
Okay.
And I liked it. Yeah, that's pretty good. Hey, so anyway, at the beginning of the program, I told you about Red Sox Nation being everywhere, including Dodger Stadium in 2018. Listen to this cheering from at Dodger Stadium when Steve Pearce hits a 3-run double in the 9th inning of Game 4 to put the Red Sox up by 4 runs and really pretty much clinch that series.
Into the gap in right center field. This ball is down into the wall. It will empty the bases. Steve Pearce, what a night. 8-4 Boston in the 9th. Well, in the 8th against Jansen, he has a homer to tie the game, and this right here, best piece of hitting. Doesn't try to do too much and splits the gap, and right there you can sense. Thought everyone might come out of the dugout for the Red Sox, breaking this game open.
Okay, it is your turn now. I am going to turn the program over to you guys. If you want to unmute yourselves, please do, or if you want to put your answers in chat or your questions or comments in chat, you could do that as well. Real quick, if any one of you is interested in the Ultimate Boston Red Sox Time Machine book, I autograph it for free and I personalize it for free and I ship it for free. And all you got to do is go to Etsy, Etsy.com, ETSY, Etsy, and you type in Gitlin Books. There's another guy named Gitlin selling books on Etsy, which is amazing because it's not a very common name. So you got to put it all in one word. Etsy.com, Gitlin Books, all one word. And you can check out the Red Sox book, the Ultimate Boston Red Sox Time Machine book. I'm only going to brag once tonight. I won more than 45 awards as a writer. And so I write in a very entertaining style. So I think you'd have a lot of fun with the book. And there's a lot of cool information over 120 years. So anyway, now it is your turn. Anything you want to ask me, any comments you want to make, feel free.
Jim asks, wasn't Pearce MVP of the series?
I believe he was. Yes, I think he won the MVP. Yeah, he had the game tying home run and I'm not sure what he did in Game 6 because they are Game 5 because they won it in 5. But I think he did. I think he did win MVP. He got hot. Steve Pearce was a very, very good hitter. He was not a great fielder, and he kind of bounced around. He was kind of like a little bit more of a platoon player. And I don't even think I'm not sure if he landed with anyone this year, but I know he's still active. But anyway, yeah, I think he did win MVP.
Yeah, Marty.
Yeah.
This was really entertaining. I have a question and also a little story. First, the story. Back in 2004 in May, WDEV did a fan trip down to Fenway. They always put out all the fans down in the area of the pesky pole.
Yeah.
So you're never looking at home plate. You were always looking at the bullpen. But that's another thing. But there was an entrepreneur on the bus, and he was selling T-shirts that said, "This is next year." Wait till next year.
Yeah, sure.
And it was great. And it was great. So my question was, besides the fact of them getting rid of Babe Ruth in 2019, did the pandemic really wreck the attendance at Fenway Park?
Well, there was no attendance anywhere in baseball last year.
No, I mean in 1919.
Oh, you're talking about 1919. 20. I thought you were going to 2020. the Spanish flu you're talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah. That was that nine. I thought that was 1918.
I think
that 1919. Whatever it was. I think it might have been 1919 because I think World War I was over. Was it not, or no?
Yeah, in fact, it was said that a lot of the people that were coming back from the war and celebrations.
Right. You're the first person to ever ask that, and I frankly have no idea whether it was. I saw some old, videos of people wearing masks back then, but I never saw any at the ballpark or anything, and I don't even know if it happened. If the flu was really hit during the baseball season or what. But I do know that they never, emptied the stands. I do know that they didn't have any kind of ruling where nobody could come to the games like they did in 2020. But I would think that if the Spanish flu was going on, hot and heavy back then, that there were probably a lot of people that didn't show up to baseball games because of it. But I don't know, I don't know exactly the answer to your question, but it's a good question. I should look that up because it's kind of an interesting question.
Your answer was supposed to be, you've got to buy my book and you'll find out the answer.
No, I didn't mention that. No, you'll find out a lot from the book, but you'll not find out anything about the Spanish flu. You will find out about the fires that they had. There were a lot of fires at the ballpark that damaged the Fenway early on, and I think that they played at the Huntington Avenue grounds before they played at Fenway. So that was kind of an interesting, the early chapters are about when they played at the Huntington Avenue grounds when they were still the Boston Americans. And the Red Sox played there until 1912. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would just like to thank you. I really enjoyed this. We grew up right outside of Boston, and we never had a ton of money, but I can remember on weekends my dad hauling us all on the subway to Kenmore Square and walking up to the ball field, and we'd sit like $2-3 for a whole family just about in the bleachers. And we watched some of those games. It was awesome.
What decade was that?
Oh, the 60s and the 70s.
60s and 70s, yeah.
Yeah, we went from the time we were little kids because Canigliaro and them were all, we watched them and they had a song about Carl Yastrzemski and all that other stuff.
Yeah, they had a Municipal Stadium. They were desperate to get fans into that place, and they used to have bleacher seats for $1.
Yeah, it was pretty inexpensive because there were 6 of us and my mother and father, and she'd stay home with the little ones because I think that would have driven my father over the edge. Yeah. But we used to go out there and we thought it was the best ever.
Oh, well, you know what? I mean, if you had if you had spent your childhood going to some games at Municipal Stadium in Cleveland with just, you could count, you could sit there and count the fans. Oh, there's one, there's one, there's one, and there was 85,000 seats. The thrill of being at Fenway Park for the first time was just made it that much sweeter, the contrast that I was able to experience there.
Yeah, it was just a great memory. And some of them brought back, because I think I saw a couple of those games, but it was like, oh my gosh, I think I kind of remember that.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
I bet you don't get in for $3-4 anymore now, though.
Not unless there's some miracle going on.
Right, like you climb over the seats from somewhere else or sneak in.
Yeah. You can get in for $4 if you have like 40 more bucks besides that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Phyllis,
anyway,
Jim,
I want to thank the library again and thank all you folks for coming in tonight. If you have any other comments or questions, I'm here for you.
Yeah, this is to Phyllis. Jim asks what your favorite Sox game was that you saw in person at Fenway. This is for Phyllis.
Oh, I'm not sure that I had any specific one. I mean, the whole thing was great. And for us, to be honest, we got to do stuff with my father. That was great. He could have taken us just walking around Kenmore Square and we would have been thrilled. But I think I was young enough then that I don't remember specific ones. I remember parts of it, but whenever Canigliaro played and Petrocelli, we kind of all liked them because they were cute. And when you're a teenage girl, what can I say?
Tony Canigliaro was like a matinee idol. He was
yes, he was.
Yes, he ended up dating who was it? And I used to know this, like one of the big sex symbols of her day. He was dating her. It wasn't Tuesday Weld, it was somebody else. I can't remember. Darn it, I knew that too. I think I even have it in the book, who he was dating. But anyway, yeah, he was a big, he was a big sex symbol at that time. Tony Conigliaro was.
Yeah. If I had known he was dating somebody, then I would have been crushed. But
well, I think it was. Yeah, it might have been. What's that?
No, but it was just the whole experience of going to the game as a family thing, and getting a hot dog, and it was just great fun.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Brad says he saw Buckholz's no-hitter, and it was awesome.
Who's no-hitter?
Buckholz.
Oh, Buckholz. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, that's something. It's funny. I've been to hundreds and hundreds of games in my life, as a sports writer and as a fan. And I never saw a no-hitter. So that's a nice thing.
So I've got a comment. Joe Castiglione, our beloved radio announcer, makes me crazy so many ways when the ball is hit and it sounds like it's going out of the ballpark or it's going into deep center field and it's a foul ball, or it's caught just outside of second base. I mean, he builds up so much enthusiasm and then bashes us in so many ways.
We're very familiar in Cleveland about Joe Castiglione because he started here. This is where he got his start. He was doing the nightly sports broadcasts on the radio, on TV stations here. And I believe Castiglione I think he did some Cleveland Browns early on, but I'm not really sure. But anyway, he landed in Boston, but that can drive you crazy. And I'll tell you what, I know Joe Castiglione. I talked to him a few times when I was covering baseball. And he's a really kind of a down-to-earth guy, and he was very nice, but I can understand your frustration because we get that sometimes here in Cleveland with our announcer Hamilton, who's been around for a good 30 years now. And he does that as well. He'll talk, a ball will get hit and he'll make it seem like it's going into orbit. And then, the left fielder is like backed up to the warning track and he catches it,
Yeah.
But
The wind came up.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Well, you guys might want to. I wonder, the Red Sox have already started, so I don't want to keep you from the games. But like I say, I thank you so much. And if you want to check out the book, just go to Etsy.com and go to Gitlin Books, Gitlin, all one word, books, and you can check it out.
Yeah, Marty, can we get the books personalized for gifts for other people?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what a lot of people do. All you got to do is put, like, it'll say personalization, and you just write in who it's for.
Okay.
Whether it's for you or for somebody else. Yes.
Yes. Good.
Are you buying me a book, John?
I was going to get Daniel, my stepson, a Yankee book.
Oh, well, the Yankee book's not out yet.
Oh, it's not?
No, I
John,
just got the Red Sox and Indians. The Yankee book, I finished it, but it hasn't been published yet. It'll be published in February April of 2022.
Okay.
Next year.
John, get him a Red Sox one. Get him a Red Sox one.
I'll get me a Red Sox one.
Get